bang on 8:30 this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Neil Treacy is with us. Neil, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, so we've got a tight five for you. The Ireland turnover attack, our line-out discipline, scrum technique, CJ Stander retires, and Italy's future in the Six Nations. We haven't been good at getting through the 5 points of the tight five. Do you think we're going to be able to do it today?
Well, I think we're already a little bit behind schedule, so I think we're going to be up against
it. We've got 19 minutes, I'm being told.
Oh, 19. Well, maybe. Look, I can easily talk for 19 minutes on scrum and line out alone. You know, we'll see. Do we get to them? We'll try our best this time around. If you need me to stop talking about anything,
should we flip the order? Flip the order and do all the stuff that you're like mad into at the end, so that way you'll be incentivized to get there and start with Italy and CJ. Should we do that?
No, because I actually put a lot of work into these ones, and I want to make sure I actually get them done.
Go on. We're going to start with our turnover attack. Let's go.
Yeah, so this was probably off the back of Niamh Briggs was on with the lads on Monday Night Rugby talking, and you know one of the key points she made was that for the amount that Ireland turn over the ball, whether it's just kind of at ruck time on the ground or at lineouts as well, that they don't seem to actually use the turnover ball to really have a good counter attack at teams. So I thought that was a really interesting point, and I decided I'd have a little browse through the lineouts in particular from Sunday against Scotland when they turned over 6 Scottish lineouts, and what sort of things were they trying to do. Now, for the most part, Niamh was absolutely bang on with what Ireland were trying to do, so that pretty much on all of the lineouts that they did steal from Scotland, it was a case of they got the ball, they ended up taking a couple of short carries with forwards that were relatively close to the lineout itself before maybe they might have gone wide after that, or if they were a little bit further back the pitch, they would have put through a box kick, or they would put in a box kick or a Gary Owen or something like that, a contestable kick to try and basically win territory. So I've picked out a couple examples of this where, in fairness, it actually did work to an extent, that practice of using the turnovers to try and gain even more territory with a good kicking game, because what it was doing was normally when Ireland are struggling with the box kicks and struggling to win those back, it is because they're doing it at a very slow pace around a ruck or a maul where people have time to get set and the opposition have time to put blockers into place. Whereas on a couple of these occasions, as I'll show you here, what they were able to do was put the ball into areas where there weren't too much Scottish cover. So it was allowing the opportunity for Robbie Henshaw on one of these and Keith Earls on another to get up very, very quick and put the opposition under pressure and contest that aerial ball. So we have a few screen grabs here. We'll just put the first one up. This is the first line I'm going to show you on 6 minutes. It's a great steal by James Ryan, who was pretty much man-marking Johnny Gray for the day. You could see it when they were coming into the lineouts. He was essentially facing the Scottish lineout. Wherever Johnny Gray was going, he was going. And I think Ryan deserves a lot of credit actually on Sunday for the way he man-marked him and timed his jumps. So hopefully the first screen grab we're looking at here, it is Johnny Gray and James Ryan up, both of them contesting for the ball. Is that what we're seeing?
We moved on from that one to Sexton, yeah.
Okay, so we're on, Johnny Sexton has the ball here. He's circled in the red. Robbie Henshaw is circled in the yellow. So this is basically what has happened. There have been a couple of short little carries just outside where Ireland had stolen that line out. Ball goes out to Johnny Sexton, and he's launching basically a Gary Owen right up into the 22. But what you can see is if you look across that Scottish defence, there aren't too many numbers across there. Like, they're well spaced out in terms of a defence, but there isn't much. Yeah, there isn't much traffic in the way for Robbie Henshaw to attack. So now we'll move on to the next clip. This is as the ball is probably mid-air. And now we can see Robbie Henshaw circled in the yellow.
Yeah.
And Stuart Hogg circled on the left, your picture on the right. And that is, look at the amount of space that Robbie Henshaw has to attack Stuart Hogg there. There is no traffic for him to navigate. There are no, kind of lazy Scottish runners just trying to get in the way of Robbie Henshaw without making it too obvious. Ultimately, what that leads to is Robbie Henshaw gets up in the air, contests with Stuart Hogg, knocks the ball back, and Ireland win the ball and ultimately win a penalty that they go on to. That ultimately, I think, leads to the opening try of the game. So that's probably it's not attractive to watch, but as we can see, sometimes it is effective if you're able to put the kick into space and put in a good kick where players have a huge opportunity and space to run into without loads of traffic. We're going to look at another example here now if we move on to our next picture. So what we should see, this will be just after a lineout has been won. Johnny Sexton, or Jamison Gibson Park, I should say, sorry, is circled in the red.
Yeah.
And Keith Earls is circled at the top of your screen in the yellow. So we've skipped the line out here because it was just as simple. It was a knock on by the excuse me, I keep coughing. It was knock on by the or an overthrow, I should say, by George Turner. CJ Stander collected at the back, and Jamison Gibson Park went for a box kick. Look, they're much deeper in their own half, so it's probably it is a safer option, probably is a more sensible option this time round. But as we can move on to our next picture here, we can see because they've been able to set up that kick so quickly. Again, you can see it's Keith Earls circled on the circle in yellow, and I believe it's Duan van der Merwe circled in the red on the left of your picture. And again, there's very, very little traffic for Keith Earls to have to run through here and contest this kick. And he does so. He manages to get up on van der Merwe on time. He tackles him, brings him to ground, actually drives him back a couple of yards. Tygburn gets in over the top of it. It's a penalty to Ireland. Johnny Sexton kicks it, and it's 3 points for Ireland. So that's a couple of examples where it actually works quite well. There were another couple of examples throughout the match where, you know, it came close to working, or Ireland won a bit of scrappy ball off it. But these were the two most kind of clear and obvious examples of why it worked. I will just use an example of the one time Scotland actually turned over an Irish lineout, and what most other teams would try and do, and trying to get the ball a little bit wider. So we can see here what we should be seeing on our screen is a lineout. Scott Cummings and James Ryan are both going up for it. Unfortunately, it looks like it was probably just a poor throw from Herring. It was a little bit over on the Scottish side. You can kind of see that James Ryan is leaning over to try catch it. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
So that's just neat. I'm just showing you there where the lineout was lost. But as we can see then on the next picture, Sean Maitland circled in the yellow at the bottom of the screen. He was the one that ended up kind of catching the ball off the back of it. And straight away, he flung it out towards the centre of the pitch, towards Hamish Watson in the red, who made a short little carry. Scotland got the ball out onto the far touchline afterward and actually worked their way up towards the Irish 22 as a result. So it's probably, I'm just trying to show you the two examples of how teams are approaching it, and why Ireland's example is not exactly pretty on the eye, but sometimes it actually does lead to good results.
There's a weird psychosis in Irish rugby and people who write about it that, like, kicking is always bad. Every box kick is bad because sometimes it hasn't worked out, and we've watched too much of it and we're bored of it now, and we all want to watch a team who plays like the Crusaders. Why can't we be the Crusaders? Is to me what the undercurrent is, like, he's box kick, get him off. It's like, well, I mean, isn't our culture kicking? Didn't we invent the Gary Owen? And also, doesn't all the field sports we play involve kicking and catching? Shouldn't we be the world's best kickers? Wouldn't that be a good thing for us to go, we're going to be the best kicking team in the world, and we'll also run when we need to, but when we kick, it's going to be bloody effective? Yeah,
and I think, in fairness to Jamison Gibson Park as well, he's not actually getting enough credit whatsoever for the quality of his box kicks, because they have actually, by and large, been really, really good. I think it is just one of those tactics that probably when box kicks were around maybe in the 90s and early to mid 2000s, it was very much a case of you were just kind of like popping a little box kick over the top when there weren't other options on. You weren't sending up this huge contestable into the air for other people to chase on. It was just a little chip over the top of the ruck. Whereas now, like, territory has just become such a huge part of the game that even if you don't necessarily have the ball, if you're pinning the opposition back down towards their 22, you know, you have a good chance of winning a penalty off the back of it. You have a good chance of forcing them into a mistake. It's just the way the game has changed, I think, over the last 10 years. And unfortunately, it's just not a very attractive thing to watch. But sometimes when it's done well, it can be very, very effective.
There's the psychic trauma, of course, of us having box kicked away our chance of winning a quarter-final in 1991, which still, I think, is the ghost that haunts Irish rugby. But, you know, let's move on past the quarter-finals for today. Line-out discipline is next.
Yeah, so this was something I brought up on last week's edition, and it was, do you remember we were talking about the obstruction penalties that Ireland given away against Italy on a couple of occasions?
Yes, you called this in advance. You snitched out Ireland, and the referees were watching, and they were like, hang on, I saw Neil Treacy do exactly this. That's a penalty, Ireland. You can't do it.
Well, no, unfortunately, Roman Pratt probably didn't even have to be watching the Tide 5 last week. Like, he was the TMO for the game between Ireland and Italy 2 weeks ago. He was referee on Saturday against Scotland. So he would have seen Ireland give away these two penalties. And I tried to look throughout the Italy and the Scotland game for examples of when Ireland did this and got away with it. And to be totally honest, I actually couldn't find any. anytime they set up decent mauls and didn't concede a penalty off the back of it, it was because they were doing it the correct way. They weren't obstructing anyone. So I really don't see why they are still persisting with this when pretty much every single time over these last few games that they have tried it, that they have been penalised for it. So the first picture we're going to look at again, it is Tadhg Beirne lifting James Ryan in the line-out. If we move on to the second one, we can see just as they're coming to ground, Tadhg Beirne is beginning to step across James Ryan and kind of just act as a little blocker between Ryan and the Scottish pack. And then if we move on to the third picture, we can see that Tadhg Beirne, he's actually completely overshadowed and he has almost gone to the opposite side of James Ryan completely. It's quite blatant. It's very, very easy to spot for the referee, and that's 3 occasions now when Ireland have given away penalties off the back of this. They were lucky on this occasion. Finn Russell took a shot at goal and he missed it off to the right. Against Italy, they tried it twice in the Italian 22 and were penalised on both occasions for it when a try really should have been on the cards. So it could have been much more costly for Ireland over these last couple of games. Referees are very much onto it. Obstruction, something that they're trying to clamp down on. I just don't see the point of why Ireland are trying to do this anymore. Yeah,
Ireland, look, England will kick that to the corner and they'll win the line out and they'll roll their maul and we'll be down 7 points essentially. And it's like, it seems needless, but you've pointed it out twice now and no doubt they're watching. So what's your message to Paul O'Connell there, Neil?
I'd like... When Ireland have set up mauls properly over the course of those couple of games, particularly, I was going to bring up, I just didn't have the space and time. I think today, like, remember Jameson Gibson Park getting held up for that try in the first half on Sunday? Like, that came off the back of a really, really well set up Irish maul, and there was a great example of James Ryan absolutely taking out one of the Scottish players who was trying to come in at the side. It was just good maul play, good protection of the ball. They managed to work it into an area where the maul was turning towards the try line in a nice way, and it took a really, really good tackle from Jamie Ritchie and maybe a bit of lying over the ball for Hamish Watson to get on top of it and win the penalty. But, that's an example of a good maul. Ireland are very, very good at doing it. Their line out itself has improved dramatically. They're winning their ball much more comfortably. Stick to the basic stuff.
Okay. Next is scrum technique.
Yeah, this is just going to be a short little one. It was just to look back on, do you remember we were talking about the Ireland bind at the scrum with their second rows? This is just an example of, they didn't actually use it too much on Sunday. This was only the one time I could clearly see it happening. And they actually ended up giving away a penalty on this scrum. But I just wanted to point it out again, just to kind of emphasise what it is they're doing. So we look at our first picture here. The yellow circle on the left is basically just the gap where Ian Henderson's bind should normally be on James Ryan. As you can see, he has it tucked in under his hooker instead. And what he's losing there is that he's not necessarily bound to James Ryan, so he's not getting tight onto his second row. But why they're making up for that is if you look at CJ Stander at the back, or whoever is going to be playing number 8, he's bound in under the legs of those 2 second rows. So even though the second rows aren't bound to each other, CJ Stander is binding them together and holding them in closer together as well. So it's the trade-off. If we move on to the second picture, we can see where the penalty is given away. Cian Healy just gets popped up into the air, loses his bind, and it was a Scottish penalty. They didn't try it again from what I could see after it. I'll be curious to see to know if they deliberately decided to change that up during the game because it didn't really work. But overall, the Irish scrum has been good. It was a good battle at the scrum, I thought, on Sunday. Both sides won a penalty or 2 off each other, and the rest were pretty even and in and out, and it wasn't too messy.
It was kind of break even, wasn't it? And some of the penalties that we won, they could have actually been given them, and there were other penalties that weren't given on both sides, where they just decided, let's let the ball be put out. And it seems that's happening a bit more, that there'll be some penalties in the scrum, but it doesn't feel like referees are going to allow one team to beat the other at the moment by sheer dominance in the scrum.
Yeah, and I think a lot of referees now as well is if the ball is there and it's easily played off the back and, there's maybe a slip in the front row and it collapses, I think the referees are happy enough to play on. It's probably only when there is a blatant bit of foul play or, a blatant penalty being conceded that they're actually going to step in. Like the example I showed there, I wasn't really highlighting Cian Healy making a mistake or anything. sometimes everyone at some stage has a scrum where you go backwards or you get popped up in the air. Like, overall, the Irish scrum has been pretty good this year, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the binding situation. As I said last time around as well, officially it's against the rules, but I think we're kind of moving to a stage where Ireland are doing it more so for stability rather than anything else. And I think when you look at how the scrum has changed over the decades, and how a lot of the laws regarding kind of like binds and where people are setting up are still the same, I would be curious to see if World Rugby kind of brought together a lot of the world's top scrum coaches and head coaches to see, are there changes that should be made to the way teams are supposed to be setting up in the scrum that would actually make it a little bit more stable, that we'd see less resets, because that's something that you really hate having to watch in the final 10 minutes of games.
Okay, let's move on. CJ Stander's retirement. A couple of comments for you. CJ's a great player, but if we're being honest, Ireland needs an offloading number 8, says MOC. That was his biggest weakness. He never offloaded, ever. In Bodwy Trust 13 says, huge game for Ireland, finally getting rid of a player who can't even pass a ball 5 yards. All the talk of playing expansive rugby is undermined by picking players like him. Both of you are shifting uneasily there in your seats, rolling. I can see and hear the rolling of eyes 3 doors over.
But at least he's named himself after Brian O'Driscoll rather than some sort of very primitive ball-carrying player. So he's consistent in Bodwy Trust 13. He likes Brian O'Driscoll and he likes offloading. What is
CJ Stander's legacy?
He threw 2 offloads on Sunday against Scotland.
Like, you know. Let's reframe the conversation. What is CJ Stander's legacy, Neil?
It's a massive legacy. Like, I think a lot of people are quick to forget how difficult it actually was for him when he first joined Munster, because he started out, his first start against Glasgow was sensational. I honestly can't remember a Munster debutant who made such an impact in their opening game in Thomond Park. But for the guts of 12 or 18 months, he actually really struggled to get a place in that Munster team. And it was a source of enormous frustration for Munster fans. I can remember it so well. Every single week when there was a team named, people were wondering, why isn't CJ Stander there? Why isn't CJ Stander among the subs even? And they were looking at the players that were included, and they could not figure out why CJ Stander wasn't included. So he had a pretty difficult time when he first came to Ireland, and he had to really, really work up his place in the team before even, passing those few years and getting into the Irish setup as well. I don't think you could find anyone in Munster or in Limerick, I think specifically, who'd have a bad word to say about him, because anyone who's crossed paths with him only has nice things to say. And, when people talk about, why should a project player be taking the place of an Irish-born player in the Irish squad? And one of the arguments that's always thrown back is, look, it's all the Munster fans and all the Limerick people who are quick to stand up for him. But, well, that's because they've crossed paths with him on a personal level. And, they've been able to see the kind of person he is. So I think he leaves an absolutely massive legacy. As you were running that poll there, probably, I would say, probably the best foreign imports into Ireland for any of the Irish provinces. Certainly Munster's best.
Yeah, I think Leinster fans would definitely say that the impact that Easton Asewa had, and also the impact that Rocky Elsom had going back, Brad Thorne too, they all won European Cups, so that kind of has had an immediate, clear knock-on delivery of silverware for a team that was pretty close to it. But CJ has been a cultural, he's helped to rescue the culture in many ways from a team that was kind of really struggling for its identity in the aftermath of its great team into a team that has been very close to achieving great stuff in the semi-finals of European Cups. Like we forget that being in the semi-final of a European Cup, as often as Munster have been, is the sign of a really strong, well-run, organised, a powerful culture in the province to produce a team that can go across Europe and do it. And Louise Gavin brought up the point earlier on, would we have been better for the long term if we'd had Rhys Ruddock have those 50 caps, or if we'd had, somebody else, Jack Conan or whoever, win those caps, or, maybe Coombs would be further down the line if there wasn't somebody ahead of him like CJ. And I understand why people will make that argument. She wasn't making the argument, by the way. She was just saying that there are people out there making that argument. I don't want to misquote her. But the thing is that, the legacy doesn't just have to be that you then go on into coaching or that you're there all the time. It's that you were there establishing the culture on a daily basis. And that continues on. That's the whole point about this. It's supposed to be a continuum. So I think his legacy will survive him leaving.
Yeah, 100%. Like, as a player, CJ Stander put bums on seats in Thomond Park on a regular basis when other players probably weren't doing so. Maybe around 2014, 15 and 16. He put bums on seats in the Aviva Stadium, I would say, as well. He's the reason probably why that there are a lot more kids maybe playing rugby around the country, because he's one of those players people looked up to. He was an all-action kind of a player, and he had such a good reputation off the pitch as well. So, like, I as you were saying as well, like, I see why people might say, oh, well, look, if we hadn't brought in this project player, this, you know, Irish-born players would have been given a better chance. They would have earned more caps. I just don't agree with it. I do understand the logic of it, but I think when you actually look at when you take CJ Stander as an example of a player, I can't agree with it.
Yeah, and look, it's possible to have conflicting thoughts around the whole issue of project players and whether or not we're doing it the right way, and also at the same time have nothing but love for what CJ Stander has done. So, Neil, we leave it there. Good stuff. 4 out of 5, not bad. Neil's Type 5 will be back next week when we promise to get to it. If you want, we can, if you want any questions for Neil, we can talk about them, no problems. 0879 180 180.